Yesterday I watched it on YouTube. Now I know it's a fact.
G'day everyone, I am the anti-theocrat, and if you can hear the air conditioning blowing, I'm very sorry, but before I got out of bed this morning, the clock radio was telling me that it was 38 degrees Celsius here. A nice, comfortable temperature outside because there was a breeze blowing. I don't know that it was 38. It was probably over the 30, but the breeze was just keeping some of that heat off when you went out the door. I was supposed to crack 42, and if it hasn't done that, I'd be very surprised. So a lovely day, but it means the air conditioner's on. Got to ask, how many people in the world would you expect to say 42 was a lovely day? Yes, it's a warm one, but let's get on with this. I'm going to talk about literary fraud, but it's going to be a bit more than literary fraud because this is also racial fraud. And I mean, it fits well with today's gender politics where we can be whatever we want to be. You can just choose because everything's a social construct. So it's probably not fraud anymore, is it? It's just accepted norm. But let's have a look at this because I still think it's literary fraud. I'm going to draw on this source first. Wikipedia, by the way, are begging for money, and Wikipedia can get fucked because of these entries. Simply because of these entries. If there was any greater sign to me that Wikipedia was trying to swing a left agenda, it's these articles. And although this one is more damning than the next one, I'm not impressed. Helen Dale, as she's now known. I've seen her with Sargon recently. Nice to see you looking well, Helen. I knew you as Davydenko when I met you, but then we weren't really introduced by surnames. I just sort of met this blonde girl named Helen at a party one night, and for about 6 hours we discussed European history and things, and I debunked her pretty much all night on pretty much everything. At that point, I had no fucking idea who you were, Helen. This was a very long time ago. And about 6 weeks after I met you, this happened. Your book that was published in 1994 under the pseudonym Helen Davydenko, it wasn't published under that pseudonym. That was the name that you presented to people. That's how you wanted us to know you. Won the Miles Franklin Award. The Miles Franklin Award being one of our most prestigious writing awards, apparently. Anyway, youngest award winner. Woohoo! But it turned out that there was some controversy. So I'm going to dip down to controversy. The novel won the Miles Franklin Award, one of the most prestigious literary awards in Australia at the time. The media discovered Helen Dale's identity and legal name. This prompted much debate on the nature and identity, the nature of identity, ethnicity, and authenticity in Australian literature. Despite the adverse publicity of the author, the novel won the 1995 Australian Literary Society Gold Medal. This was after it was debunked and after it lost its Miles Franklin. They still had to try and press forward that they'd done no wrong. So they gave her another literary award. When Dale submitted her novel to the University of Queensland Press in 1993, she said it was based upon recorded interviews with her own relatives, amongst them her uncle, by the name I'm not even going to try saying. After the awards, the Sydney Morning Herald mistakenly reported in 2005 that the novel had been submitted as a non-fiction book. I'm going to argue that Miss Dale, as she's now known, presented this book under the name of Davydenko and presented herself as Eastern European, because that's what she did to me at a party. At no time was I given to believe she was anything else than an Eastern European blonde girl by the name of Helen. At no point. She presented this as based upon interviews with her own relatives. This was not a mistake. This was how it was presented. That might have been the first time that someone said it was a non-fiction book in print, but it was not a mistake. The author's 1993 note accompanied her. This, by the way, this is why Wikipedia can get fucked. Because there was no mistake. This word is totally out of place. Accompanied her manuscript and read the things narrated in this book really happened. The things they did are historical accuracies. So, even though Wikipedia have gone to the effort of saying mistakenly, the author herself was definitely promoting it this way. And as I said, that's all I was ever given to believe. And I had no fucking idea who she was. At all. I just met this girl at a party. Then Dale wrote that she was presenting her book as fiction, saying, "This is also a work of fiction. I have presented it as fiction." Yeah. I'm calling bullshit. But, yes, we'll try and wash over the fact that she lied. But I came down to this. This is actually something I didn't know. I know she's done law at university. I know she worked with a political party as an advisor. I'm wary of just about anyone who worked with this woman at this point. And don't get me wrong, Helen, I liked you. And I still, when I saw you with Sargon, I thought you still seemed a quite likeable person. Now you're actually writing historical fiction. I think you're finally going in the direction you're meant to be doing, but you should never have been doing shit like writing for newspapers. Dale was briefly a columnist for the Brisbane daily newspaper, the Courier Mail. She was dismissed for allegations of plagiarism after repeating jokes originally from the Evil Overlord list in one of her columns and passing them off as her own. I'm sorry, Helen. I really am, because I think you should be given all your awards back. I really think you should. I think you should get everything back because of this. Does anyone watching this see a banner up here saying this page is being reviewed or may have any queries or anything else going on? Because I don't see a fucking thing. I see this presented as factual information by Wikipedia. Now, in the talk here, someone notes that this information is essentially all cited from the same source, which is the author's own website. So he's describing himself. Essentially, this is the author's own record of the author. What does it say about Bruce? This is where we should have learned a lesson from Helen. We really fucking should have learned a lesson from Helen. Bruce Pascoe was born in 1947, is an Indigenous Australian writer of mixed Cornish... look, I'm not even reading those tribe names, don't give a shit. Heritage. I don't give a shit because he's not. Okay? He just isn't. I'm probably poisoning the well here because maybe you should go and look it up for yourselves. But no, fuck it, he isn't. And I don't care if I'm poisoning the well. This is literary fraud, and we should never have let this happen again. And this isn't even the bloody second time this has happened in Australia. He's best known for his work, Dark Emu. This is the book that I have taken issue with. Black Seeds, Agriculture or Accident. Because this book is going into our public schools Our local public library just bought it, but luckily I got hold of the people who needed to be gotten hold of, and it's going into the non-section fiction, the literature side of the library, not the non-fiction, and will be going in with the information that the writer is not Indigenous and that the information in the book is not historically correct. So, yeah. One book in 200,000 apparently that have been sold will have that in the front of it. Look, I'm not even going to go through the wiki because it is just Bruce Pascoe selling himself. What I will do is go down here and point out that he's had these notable awards, right? He was a fiction writer, so essentially he's done a complete Scientology on everyone. He's gone from being a fiction writer to being the author of his own religion. Full Scientology. So he has these literary awards. Now he has the New South Wales Premier's Indigenous Writers Prize for 2016 and the Dreamtime Person of the Year. This is a non-Indigenous man, and these are Indigenous awards. So there's a bit of theft going on here, really. This is fraud leading to theft. It makes me wonder if people think there are just no Indigenous writers of worth. And if there's not, what have they done wrong? I'm not taking the blame, personally. Anyway, I'm going to move on. I'm going to take us to a website which is going to do is doing good work, as far as I can tell, in debunking this guy. And I can't keep prattling on forever. Let's let them have a prattle, shall we? This is Dark Emu Exposed. All the links will be below. The myth of Aboriginal agriculture. So you can see there's a timeline of claims and debunkings going on here, going back quite some way on this website. Going back even further. Doesn't seem either, or I'm not. No, I'm not loading. So we've got a lot of claims going on there anyway. You can see that there's a lot of material in here in the way of debunking. Now, what the media says about Dark Emu Exposed, I'm going to start there because I want to show that I've tried to examine the worth of this site, that it has actually done its homework, that I haven't done what a lot of people do when they cite a website. I haven't just gone, oh look, they said this thing, right? As I enter into this site, I find my question to them, my first question. Do you have a link to the cited Informer investigation? I have to get this right if I'm going to cover it. So, as you can see, I've asked them to support something that was in one of these links. I've looked at the links and I didn't open them all, I have to admit. I've opened ones that I thought would be critical of Dark Emu Exposed, and so been looking for debunkings of this website or people who've been critical of it and found something wrong with it. What I essentially found is what I'm going to show you from Joy Radio. Now, I didn't know who Joy Radio was, and I hope that I never have to have interaction with Joy Radio ever again after this. Not because of who they are, but of course of what they are. Who they are is an LBGT, LMNOP, QRSTU, VWXY, and Z radio station. And I'm not against that, okay? I don't care. I don't care that you're an LBGT radio station. It seems a bit limiting and what have you to me, but I guess everyone has to have their specialty, don't they? But what they are is a station dedicated to gender politics, very heavily to gender politics. They have an extreme left-lean bias, and yeah, I just, when someone says to you leftist, now as someone who is a left-leaning centrist myself, I sort of object to the word leftist often, but when it comes to people like this, I think it is an apt description. They are like the religious right of the left. That's Joy Radio. So I opened Joy Radio's site here, and I found it as an example of what the sort of material I was finding, and I found this here. I will, of course, be putting the links down below, but this, at 24 odd seconds in or something, stated that a study had been done of the Dark Emu exposed website. Now, give me a second here. I'll open this and see if I can find this.
There has also been a website set up by an unknown person that attempts to inaccurately discredit Dark Emu. This website was investigated by the Informer's Toby Halligan, who judged it to be consistently inaccurate, poorly researched, and in some cases entirely false.
I ended up searching for this Informer review, right? I didn't realise that we were actually on the Informer. I had to go looking for the Informer. I found this link down on the page that led us to their Facebook page. Oh, I had that launched in a good spot, didn't I? Essentially, what it told me about them is they don't do journalism. That's not their thing. They don't do investigation. They don't do journalism. What they do is report on other people's media, and occasionally they will talk with someone with a vested interest about a topic. More of a sort of current affair with their lean dumped into it, the LBGT message thing going on. I wasn't impressed, and I think if you were going to cite them as a source for anything, you'd be doing quite badly by yourself. And when I did find a link back to this supposed review, where I ended up was here. Bruce Pascoe, the demon. Does it remind you anything? Yes, we're back to the same. Yeah, that's right. Through all my searching, my reference for their review of the Dark Emu exposed website was themselves. And that was it. For the rest of the 10 minutes, they just talked to Bruce. So letting Bruce tell us how wonderful Bruce was. And that there is my summation of everything debunking the Dark Emu exposed website. After that, I hooked into reading the Dark Emu exposed website to see more about what they were doing. Checking the sources before reading the sources, making sure I was reading something that was worth my time. What we did was open some links. So we get fact-checking of Mr. Pascoe's grain stores. Nice, isn't it? Pretty. I will leave some of this out and duck down to his Spicola lecture. Ernest Giles' brother, a bit earlier than this, was travelling through the Northern Territory and came across huge stores of what he discovered was grain stored up in platforms 3 metres off the ground. Each of those stores weighed a tonne, and he had never seen anything like it before. But it didn't stop him stealing it, because once again, he was an explorer. He was lost, and he was angry. He took the grain that had been stored for the harvesters. Mr. Pascoe provides no specific location evidence to support his incredible claim, a claim that the Aboriginals built a timber platform 3 metres from the ground that was strong enough to carry a tonne, the weight of a small car. No evidence was provided to explain how the weight was calculated to be a tonne, nor what the holding vessel was constructed of. Given the density of grain is about 700 grams per litre, then the storage vessel would have to be of a volume of about 1,400 litres. And what was it made of? Timber, planks, dishes, woven blankets. Nobody knows. We've found photographs of some of the typical Aboriginal food storage platforms from Central Australia. These are from Mr. Pascoe's cited reference in Dark Emu, Paul Mermott's wonderful book on Aboriginal architecture. The Aboriginal Architecture of Australia. QUP 2009. And as you can see from the figure 1, these are typically only about 1.8 metres high and are not strong enough to hold anything like 1 tonne of grain seeds. It must be noted that I live in this big dry bit in the middle of Australia, and this would be a very primitive way of keeping ants out of anything you have to store. Everything you do here is going to be ants in this country. My parents parked their motorhome for too long. Ants built nests in the walls. It's just hard to escape ants in this place. If you've got a vehicle parked for any length of time, clear the grass around it. The ants will use the grass or the trees to access your vehicle. If they will climb off the ends of branches of trees to access your vehicle to build nests in your vehicle. So just make sure that the only things touching the ground are the wheels. So yes, if you were storing in a primitive way against ants, you would do something like this. It's not unreasonable. In an effort to verify these claims by Mr. Pascoe, we have read Ernest Giles' journal, Australia Twice Traversed, Volumes 1 and 2, 1889, and word searched the online version and have found no references to any native granaries in Ernest Giles' writings. Our research also shows that Ernest Giles' brother, Robert Eugene Giles, and the reason this is important is because Ernest Giles' brother is the cited person by this supposed historian, was not an explorer as suggested by Mr. Pascoe, but he was in fact an accountant in Hamilton, Victoria. He doesn't appear to have been exploring in the Northern Territory, and as Mr. Pascoe has provided no evidence for his claims, we are left to wonder as to whether Mr. Pascoe may have his explorers mixed up. 2 other colonials in the region at the time, who were brothers, as well as contemporaries of Ernest Giles, are Christopher and Alfred Giles. So this expert on Australian Aboriginal history couldn't even get his explorers right. And that's providing that these people have tracked down the right explorers. But as you can see, they have gone to some effort to not just look up Ernest Giles' brother, they've gone that step further to find some other people writing history at the time who may have been the ones he was talking about. They haven't just left it at the first answer. We have read the journal of Alfred Giles exploring in the 70s and the construction of the overland telegraph line. And nowhere could we find any mention of native granaries or storage platforms of any size. However, Alfred's brother Christopher Giles does record coming across a native granary in Central Australia. The academic Ingrid McFarlane, in her 2010 thesis Entangled Places, Interactional History in the Western Simpson Desert, Central Australia, records that in Christopher Giles there is an unusually sensitive observer. He has a good eye for telling details. He is notably free from prejudice of his time regarding Aboriginal people, providing amiable, unjaundiced accounts in which the full humanity of Aboriginal people registers. An explanation for this tone may lie in earlier familiarity with Aboriginal people. He says he was accustomed to the natives from my boyhood and able to speak at least one dialect fluently. To which there is a page reference. So here in Christopher Giles, we have what should be regarded as a reliable witness, certainly reliable for the time. McFarlane then quotes Christopher Giles further regarding pilfering by the Aboriginals. At first we saw but little of the natives, although we had good reason to know that they saw a great deal of us. Axes began to disappear, and the men's clothes hung on bushes to dry near the camps would be missing in the morning. She continues with, while collecting poles for building the telegraph line in the Fink riverbed, Christopher Giles encountered a tree platform on which a native granary. In it were stores of different grass seeds in bags made from the ends of shirt sleeves and trouser legs that had been appropriated earlier from Giles' survey team's washing line. So the containers that were found to be on top of this storage platform were stolen from the explorers, from the people doing the telegraph line. Giles also describes the removal and reinterpretation of the construction team's clothes from the Fink River Channel, where he discovered a native granary consisting of bags of different kinds of grain stored up for the winter, or rather the dry season. And we're still talking about grass seeds, effectively. The bags were of various sizes and consisting of the legs of our trousers and the sleeves of our shirts, tied up at each end and filled with seeds. This was too much for the patience of my men, who were forthwith confiscating the whole lot. But I would not allow this, nor permit anything to be removed. This is contrary to the statement made by Pascoe that he was lost, he was angry, he took the grain that had been stored for the harvesters. Absolutely fucking contrary. The guy, in his own words, says he stopped his men from nicking their clothes back to leave the grain there for the poor savages, I'm guessing. Well, given that he's supposed to be a sympathetic writer, it's probably not even the poor savages. He probably just understands that these people are scrounging a living off the ground. And by destroying what grain storage they had stolen, he'd be doing them a disfavour. A serious disfavour. So you understand that this page has gone to some effort to clarify what this Burke has written. Not just stopping at the first hurdle, but searching further and actually finding references that are in line with this. But this is a total invention. Absolutely, totally an invention. 3 meters, never. 1 ton, never. It doesn't say anything about him never seeing anything like it before, and he didn't steal it. He was also not lost and angry. They were putting him up damn telegraph lines. They knew exactly where they were going. I'm going to give you a little bit of Mr. Bolt here if I can. Mr. Bolt's going to go into our next topic, which is Bruce a blackfella?
Pascoe says is a member of no fewer than 3 Aboriginal tribes. The Yuin from New South Wales, the Boonwurrung from Victoria, and an unspecified tribe from Tasmania. Here is Pascoe on the ABC.
My name's Bruce Pascoe. and I'm a Yuin Bunurong and Tasmanian man.
In fact, as I've mentioned before, genealogical records like this one here, compiled and checked by researchers from the darkemuexposed.org website, show that every single one of Pascoe's ancestors are in fact of British descent, and that includes both of his mother's grandmothers, one of whom Pascoe this year claimed yet again was his Aboriginal ancestor, although at other times he said, well, not so sure after all. When Pascoe nominated one of his two great-grandmothers on his mother's side, he must have meant one of two women, obviously, but one of them, Mrs. Smith, was in fact English and never left England. And that left Elizabeth Jane Hall as the only candidate, but both her parents were English, say the records. Now, sure, there could have been a mistake. I don't know. An illegitimate birth. And I've twice asked Pascoe to explain whether I'm wrong here, where the mistake is. He will not respond.
I'm going to leave that one there. I think that says it all. I hope it says it all. Yes. No, I'm not actually going to leave that there. What am I talking about? Because through the Dark Emu Exposed site, we actually have reference to another history site which I've come across before, Australian History Truth Matters. I agree 100% with this sentiment, but they've put together, is Bruce Pascoe an Aboriginal man? To which their answer is this. They know where Bruce Pascoe was born, they know who his parents were, they know who his grandparents were. They know who his great-grandparents were, and they know who his great-great-grandparents were. As you can see, 100% English. Everyone down here is either from England or born of English descendants. There is not one Aboriginal person in this list. Not one relation to a tribe, nothing. As this gentleman, which I know there's people now screeching, right winger, right winger! Ah! Look, I find Mr. Bolt to be right-leaning centrist, and I have no objection to that. I would rather a right-leaning centrist than a outright leftist or a religious right winger. Thank you. As a centre leftist myself, I do not find Mr. Bolt objectionable, and if you find him objectionable, that's your issue, not mine. All he's doing here is spelling out other people's research through his media platform, through his fame and the fact he has a big audience. So, yeah, we can see that Mr. Pascoe has no Aboriginal heritage. He also, Mr. Bolt here also goes into the fact that the Aboriginal tribes that he claims to be from all refute his claim to be a part of their tribe. So, and you will find all of that in the Dark Emu Exposed. I recommend that if you've got a week to spend going over this site and doing your research, it's well worth it. But I'm going to put one last nut on this bolt before we screw it up and tighten it up and send it packing. Mr. Pascoe's main reference source bombs. This is a gentleman that this arsehole is the arsehole of this arsehole. Yeah. Anyway, you get the idea. Well, Andrew Bolt, but there's a whole lot of stuff there that doesn't matter because it's basically a journalist. They've had a spat with a journalist, and he's called them out as boomers. You know, oh, you bloody boomers! You don't know nothing. I'm not a boomer. I'm also not a millennial. I'm in the middle there. I don't know what the fuck we're called. The betweeners, I don't know. Okay, millennial. So if us boomers were writing about Pascoe in his Dark Emu book, we would have perhaps dug a little deeper into the subject matter just to try and find out some more about the real story behind the creation of this wonderful history and farming handbook. The bestseller that is Dark Emu. How did it originate? Where did Pascoe really get his ideas from? It turns out Helen and her little bit of plagiarism here may actually be a big part of Mr. Pascoe's work. Well, the amateur pop-ups and grands at the Dark Emu Exposed set to work and found some very interesting background, which we think puts a whole new slant on the value, or rather lack of it, in Dark Emu's thesis. It is such a surprise to us that a professional senior reporter like Morton, this is the guy they've been having a spat with, didn't uncover this as well. Pascoe freely admits that he lifted almost the whole idea from Dark Emu from the published works of one Rupert Gertison from his 2008 book, Australia and the Origins of Agriculture, and as reported in The Australian in May 2019. Gertson died in 2013 without ever achieving a university job, and Pascoe cites him as a scholar who languished in obscurity because his theories contradicted the mainstream view. Rupert should have got all the credit for Dark Emus, he said candidly. Plagiarism. A statement that really gets agreement from Gertson's brother Rolf, a professor of economic and indigenous policy studies at Charles Darwin University. 90%. See, good old Rolf here. He's related to the Nutter, but he's got himself a lovely cushy university job. Economics and indigenous studies. How the fuck does that work? Anyway, 90% of Bruce's book is taken from my brother's research. Plagiarism, Rolf Gertson says with a chuckle, adding that this is not to belittle Pascoe's considerable achievement in popularising complex issues and shifting the national conversation about Indigenous history. Yes, shifting it to the fucking fictional, you dumb fuck. Anyway, now senior reporter Morton should have asked himself, why would it be that Gertson, the creator of 90% of Dark Emus, only languished in his obscurity, whereas Pascoe presented the same information in the Dark Emus in his Dark Emus take off into the bestseller land? That's easy. He claimed to be a black fella. But Morton followed this up to tell us, however, a bunch of world-wisely oldies, something that doesn't look quite right here. So we dug a little deeper. Oh, didn't follow up, sorry. So we dug a little deeper, and what we found was some explosive information. Information that we think shaped Gertson and his dogged but fanatical pursuit of crazy new theory of Aboriginal agriculture, and cast him as perhaps an intense personality with perhaps a poor sense of judgment. Explosive new evidence for Pascoe's Dark Emu. For in fact it transcribes that Gertson was one of modern Australia's first convicted terrorists. In August 1972, Gertson placed a bomb in the Perth office of the Department of Labour and National Service. The primitive device was timed to detonate early in the morning but failed to go off. He was subsequently arrested in Melbourne, extradited back to WA and bailed, but fled to New Zealand, where he was caught and extradited back to WA again in July 1973. Gertson pleaded guilty and served 1 year in Fremantle and Geraldton regional prisons. He later renounced violence and direct action, but he continued through his life to be a social activist strongly committed to social justice and empowerment. Well, I'm glad social justice hasn't changed its angle since the 1970s. It's still a violent piece of shit, isn't it? It's odd because to a degree in those 10 years after we're talking about here, I was essentially a pro-social justice person myself. But I think we achieved the social justice I was seeking for people. Well, most of it. Enough of it, thank you. We can stop now. It's okay. We're allowed to stop at some point. But I never remember social justice being violent. What the fuck was going on with some people? Maybe it was just me. Maybe it was just on the wrong side of the discussion with it. I should have been out laying bombs. I don't fucking know. What a classy source it appears that Pascoe has based Plagiarism 90% of his Dark Emu book on. To us, therefore, it looks quite possible that Gertsen was seen by academia as something of a crackpot and nutter. Perhaps other academics realised he may have been just a fanatic in his pursuit of his theory that the Aboriginals were farmers. Nevertheless, Gertsen's research work was given a thorough peer-reviewed academic analysis, and that's linked in 2010 at a major prehistory conference, and it was found that his evidence just did not stack up to support his view of a widespread Australian Aboriginal industry, as Pascoe calls it. And at that point, I'm going to leave this plagiarist look, this plagiarist fucking not black fella, total fucking scam artist. Look, this bugger, if you shaved him, he'd look like my grandfather, and my grandfather never claimed to be a black fella. Just because he's got the beard on doesn't make him a bloody black fella. Get over yourselves. Seriously, this is my grandfather. This bloody great honker and this ratty old face was my grandfather, minus the beard. Never a word about being black fellas. But that's not to say that anyone who's not shouldn't tick the box now. I think if you've just immigrated to Australia, it is now safe to tick the box. That one the one on all forms that says, "Are you an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander?" The things we've learned from this, and actually I shut down a page which I should have left up. That was the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs defending this man against the evidence that he is not even an Aboriginal and that his book was fictional. His response being that it was okay to put this book, essentially being, I shall paraphrase, that it's okay to put this book into schools because it's good to open up our children's minds to new ideas. But when you present this shit as actual history, that is damaging. I've turned away from supporting a lot of things that I would have supported in the past because of shit like this. You are not doing anyone any favours. Alright, I'm going to leave it at that. If you get the chance to spit at Bruce Pascoe, please don't, but let him know that you would have. Seriously, if you get to talk to anybody at all about this shit, if you get to talk to your local library about the fact that this is not a that this is a fictional work, not a historical work, if there's any way at all you can get the information about this book out, it is important that when we present our history, we present it factually. That's it. I'm getting out. I've had enough. Sorry, Helen. I actually am really sorry that I've had to pick on you all these years. You hadn't got in the shit. If you'd written your book as a fiction in the first place and never tried to present it as fact, we'd probably all be fine. You're over in Oz, look me up. We'll have a coffee. Or whatever. Another drink of wine, eh? I've been the anti-theocrat. I'm out of here. May your gods remain fictional. I'll see you in the next one.